Welcome to another episode of SummitCast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a very important topic, which is human trafficking. Welcome to today's episode of SummitCast. Today we have a guest with us, Mary Kehoe, who is working with a non-profit that is working in the field of human trafficking. So, Mary, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, how did you get interested in this topic?
Well, it was something I'd been researching on my own for a while, and then I started just giving talks about it, and then someone in the audience one day had a nonprofit that it wasn't active at the time. So he hired me on as the executive director and switched it a little bit so that it could focus on child trafficking and the prevention of child trafficking. And that's how we started. So then that was right in the very beginning of 2020. So I spent the pandemic researching and figuring out what the best way would be to prevent child trafficking.
Mm-hmm. So what did you find?
You know, the biggest thing I found was the link between trauma and trafficking. So many of the survivors talk about, that their trafficker was the first one who loved them. And, that it was through the trauma that they were groomed. So, the more we could heal trauma, the more we could reach those kids who are falling through the cracks before the traffickers did, seemed to me the best prevention. We all need to be raising awareness and talking about it and bringing it to the forefront, but what can we do beyond that? Once we've talked about it, then what do we do? Mm-hmm. So that is when I started creating a program to do that.
So that's kind of a different approach from what you usually think about with child trafficking. It's kind of the emphasis is on trying to find people after they're in the system or trying to catch the people who are doing it. And you're actually going to the very front end of, preventing people actually getting in there in the first place.
Yeah, I've met people who are the ones, getting in and saving the kids. And whenever I talk to them or hear their stories, I want to be that person. I want to be the one going in and saving them. Right now, they're only hiring, special forces people. So unfortunately, that wasn't the path I took. But yeah, so I just looked around at what I could do. And, I don't have the training that they need for going and rescuing these kids. So, for those of us who aren't special ops, it seemed like prevention was a great way to get involved and just as impactful.
Mm-hmm. So is there any particular communities that where you're doing this? I've heard that it's a big problem in Indian reservations in Montana, for example.
Yeah. So the Native American, there's a huge problem, not only in Montana, but all over the U.S. of women and children going missing, especially girls. So that would be...
They just go missing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and some of them are found dead later, and then some aren't ever found. We do know that a lot of the gangs or the cartel are coming up through reservations, and they all know that they're there, but they're too dangerous to deal with. And so there's a lot of, we think, trafficking going on with the cartel through reservations.
The reservations in the south and New Mexico and Texas and things, is it? Or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is it called?
MS-13.
MS-13.
Yeah, MS-13. Thank you. So MS-13 is, they know, and actually that's something that the people who are involved with saving children and women from the more domestic gangs know that the MS-13 coming in is even worse. What they're doing is levels beyond what the domestic gangs have been doing. And they're pushing the domestic gangs out of, or either pushing them out or taking them over. So it's a pretty dangerous situation.
Wow. And is what's happening in the border now feeding into that with kind of the open border in a sense?
Yeah, I'm sure, I'm sure it is. I haven't looked at what people there are actually saying what's going on. And it's so hard to tell nowadays what news is, it seems to be always biased one way or the other.
Yeah.
So I don't know what exactly is going on. But I do know that, yeah, there's a lot more children in the governmental places. That so when a child comes over who is unaccompanied or accompanied by someone who isn't their family, they are put into these, I can't remember what they're called, but they're put into like a boarding school is kind of what it's supposed to be. But since January of this year, reporters have not been allowed into these buildings, and we know that there has been a big influx of children going to these buildings and these institutions. So we believe that it is a very crowded situation and not good, not a good living conditions. And the fact that nobody's allowed in to see what's going on is very concerning.
I was reading some news articles which seemed to be reliable. They were kind of in local news outlets, like local TV stations near the border, rather than the national, CNN and so on. And they were saying that a lot of the minors coming over are actually being trafficked. Like, they're in Mexico. The cartels promise them, "We'll get you a job as a nanny in America." They get them across the border, and they give them, there's a phone number in a certain city to call. Like, here's your uncle in Chicago. So the immigration people will actually send them to Chicago to this person who's the uncle, who's actually a cartel member. And then what they said was the boys get enlisted in the drug distribution, and the girls get put into prostitution. Mm-hmm. And they had to pay $3,000 to the cartel to get them in the country, and then they have to work in that system until they pay off the debt, which they never can do. Mm-hmm. And then they go after the family members back in Mexico if they try to get away, and so on. So what this person was saying is that immigration has become Uber for the cartels to get their people into America. It's quite an amazing situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a thin line or a gray area between smuggling and trafficking, because as soon as there's any kind of force, fraud, or coercion, that becomes trafficking, and so someone who thinks they're being smuggled across the border, they think they're just paying to get across, and then they'll go and try to find a better life. Then, what is actually happening is they're being trafficked. And then, like you said, they're stuck in, either because they think they owe it, or their family something will happen to their family. They're in this cycle that they don't think they can get out of. So yeah, it is a pretty dangerous situation, especially for these victims. And I was actually talking to an agent from the Department of Homeland Security, and he was working on the border a couple of years ago. And what they would do is they would talk to the kids about, like, ask them questions about, like, oh, well, what does your bedroom look like? And start trying to find details about their daily life, because the smuggler or trafficker would have them certain things they'd know to say, like they had answers memorized. But then once you got down to like the details, then that's when the stories didn't match up anymore, and that's how they were catching people. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to figure that kind of stuff out.
Yeah. So do you think like is there a lot of good people in ICE that are trying to really prevent this from happening?
I mean, yeah, I think there are good people everywhere trying to prevent it from happening. Unfortunately, there are also bad people everywhere, Yeah. So, I have heard from a lot of survivors who talked about they couldn't go to the police. The police were the first ones that raped them. When they went to the police, they were just given back to their trafficker. The police were in on it. So, yeah, just because they have a badge doesn't mean they're good, and it doesn't mean they're bad. It really depends on each of the people individually.
Yeah. So the cross-border stuff is where you have the special forces guys, isn't it? That's where they need to be involved. But your focus is different, I guess. It's kind of in the domestic.
Yeah, because actually, that's a misconception with trafficking, that it all has to do with borders, and everyone who's trafficked is taken out of their home country or taken at least across state lines. And a lot of the children who are being trafficked still go to school. The majority of children trafficked are trafficked by a trusted adult. Either their parents or foster parents or a relative. So they're still, or a boyfriend. A lot of times, so they're still going to school. They're still going about their daily lives, except for those missing times. When they're off being trafficked, and then they'll go home, and yeah. So it's those kids that I think aren't being talked about or portrayed at all. So people don't know to look for it. And unfortunately, that is a huge majority. And now with online, you have child abuse material, which now the child doesn't need to be taken anywhere. They can be kept in their home and, abused and recorded and sold online.
Wow.
So that's...
By a trusted adult.
Yeah,
wow.
So many people think like, oh, well, they're home, they're safe. And that, or they're at so-and-so's house and they're safe.
Right.
So, yeah, it's definitely become a lot worse, and America is the number one consumer and producer of child abuse material.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Producer. Wow. I think, and that's a hard thing for, especially as an American, because we have kind of this leadership role in the world, and things are so great here, and everyone wants to live in the U.S. or whatever, this image of America, that we could have this kind of underbelly, we could have this, this whole undercurrent of abuse and these problems. It's like, no, that couldn't happen in America, but it does. Mm-hmm. That's really rough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So tell us about your program that you're putting together.
So I have developed a program that is mostly, it can be used anywhere, but I want to focus first on the rural areas of Montana and the Native American communities where there isn't any support, or children are kind of falling through the cracks, and help build the communities around them, because that is, the number one defense is the children in the community. So pretty much my program would have two branches, so to speak. It would be, so there would be an app, because we know that, social media, as much as some people, and me included, may not like it, and as much as we know how dangerous it is for children to be on their phones, it's not realistic to think that we're going to get the phones out of kids' hands. So what we can do is give them a social media app that is completely protected, that, we know for a fact there aren't any predators on this app. It's all the children within the program, plus, trusted mentors who have gone through, we've weeded out anyone who might be a problem. And so then through this...
is like social media how a lot of these contacts are made?
Yeah, I don't know what the numbers are, but a huge amount is through social media. Someone, I can't remember what group did this, but they made up a fake 13-year-old and 11-year-old profile for a girl, made it public, posted a few photos, and within seconds of the first photos being posted, there were just hundreds of messages coming in, from men, or pretending to be younger or not, but, all being, of a sexual nature. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not a good scene.
Yeah. So this social media app, like it's in a certain community and you know who all the people are. Is that
Yeah. So it wouldn't be an app that just anyone could download and join. You'd have the mentors that you set up, with the kids. So what we'd do is we'd have live workshops in areas where, we're coming and teaching kids skills and community building and confidence building activities, so we're kind of, it's a very holistic approach of not just teaching them about how to be aware, online and in real life of this is what a predator it looks like, this activity, this is what manipulation looks like when they're saying this is usually what they mean and what they're trying to get. And so there'd be that aspect, but then there's also just a lot of confidence building and healing of trauma, and there's the ACE factors, which is the adverse childhood experiences. And so these factors are what, the things in a kid's life that are adverse. The studies have shown that these factors often, how many they have, then relates to later in life, whether they got into drugs, got into, something violent, and actually like different health issues and early death. So to counteract these...
What are some of those factors?
If one or more of the parents is abusive or on drugs, or, if they lack... It pretty much has to do with, how secure a child feels, and I can't remember all of them.
Like parents unemployed, things like that.
Yeah, if there's been, I think even a sudden death in the family is one, and if parents have lost jobs, if parents aren't, one of the parents isn't in the picture, if they're abusive or alcoholic or on drugs, so anything that turns a home into less of a secure place for a kid to grow up in, and of course, that doesn't mean that growing up with a single parent is going to be terrible for you. There can be, that's not.
Yeah, but a single parent who's on drugs and is violent.
Right.
Yeah.
So if a child doesn't have that security net and doesn't have people that they feel that they can go to about anything, so my program would be giving them those protective factors that help counterbalance anything that's going on in their life. Even just bullying can be something that is the trauma that a predator can groom them through, like, oh, no one understands you, and you're not popular, but I understand you, and I see you, and you're just so beautiful. And, and so if they don't have their own confidence, if they don't have that circle of friends, that manipulation is a lot easier to do. The program is pretty much creating that safety net, creating that community, creating confidence for these kids, and giving them a trusted mentor that they could talk to about anything at any time, through this app. So even after we leave, we do a live workshop and we leave the community going on to somewhere else, they always know that they can get a hold of a trusted adult at any time.
Mm-hmm. So is it happening now, or are you still wanting to roll it out?
I'm still designing it and fundraising for it. That's where I'm at.
Okay. Well, how much money do you need to actually get this into place?
To just do the app design would be, so just $5,000 to design it, and then with that design we can go out to raise the bigger bucks to actually build the app, and then hire mentors, because I know a lot of people do like volunteer mentorship with this kind of a thing, but I would rather pay them, because I know that they can then give more of their time, and it can be more of that. It is their job, it is their responsibility to do this, and they're in it for the long haul. We don't want a trusted mentor of a kid to just kind of come and go. Okay, now you finally built this trust with this child, and then they've got busy in this job and that, and you're gone. Yeah. So I really want it to be, something that so mentors can see as a career, not like, we're making money off of kids at all, but that you can live and give all of your time, or all of your, professional time to this program, to these kids, so that they have that support.
Are the people who are being selected for this mentorship, are you looking towards people who've experienced abuse or other, like in a drug rehab facility? A lot of times the counselors are former alcoholics or whatever, because they then understand that system. Survivors
are really the most important voice in this fight. They understand it at a level that nobody else can. Right. So they also are far more able to spot things,
exactly.
Because it's like hardwired in at this point.
You can spot the deception if someone's actively being abused or is on that path. They can often get away with it with other people who, like if they were talking to me about this, I don't really know much about that or what this grooming experience would even feel like. Whereas someone who's been through that grooming experience, oh yeah, you're clearly being groomed. Stop talking to this person.
Yeah, and I think survivors are just really the most important voice in the whole fight, because they see that, and then they also, if you're talking to a kid, there's the like, oh well, you don't know anything, you're just this dumb adult and blah blah blah, and then it's like, no, this happened to me, and I can tell you, like, this is the shared experience. Credibility. And and that's something that for those of us who haven't had something like that happen, we can't really pretend.
I'm thinking we need to put a link in the description below if someone wants to contact you and donate to this.
Shinelightnetwork.org.
Shinelightnetwork.org. Okay, we'll have a link in the description below. So you've been to conferences and so on and met other people who are in this field. Mm-hmm. So what's happening out there?
Yeah, so I mean, COVID has definitely made it a lot harder made it a lot easier for predators, and there's been a huge influx in trafficking, and especially since, so many kids now, they're back in school mostly, but through 2020, when they're at home, they're by themselves, school's on the computer, they're not going outside, they're not going to the park, so everything's now online, and that was opening huge amount of time to predators to come in. A lot of parents don't check and don't know, like, oh, my kid's just on the computer playing a game, so that's fine. But your child's playing a game with other people, not in the house. So that means, do you know who your child is playing a game with? Like that 13-year-old boy might not be a 13-year-old boy. So, I think there was I think parents were taken by surprise, I think, a little bit with this technology of they don't know. They don't know to even check. Yeah,
that's a scary prospect, isn't it, really? Boy, it's tough being a parent these days. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
So, so what else is happening out there in the field? I mean, there are other people doing good work. Who's the guy who got, what's his name? Is it Ballard? The guy?
Tim. Yeah. There's Operation Underground Railroad. So they're going out. At first it was just international and it was just children, but now it's they've opened it up. They're also working on saving women as well. Sorry.
Have you met him and talked to him?
No, I haven't. I did go to a training with it's the Association for the Rescue of Children, so ARC, and I went to a training with them for rescuing children, and it was really amazing. So if you can go and take that training, because their idea is that, yes, I'm not the person that they're gonna call when they're going into another country to save this child, but for everyone who's in the field, whether it's prevention, whether it's you're a medical professional and you see something, they're trying to equip as many people as possible to know what to do when confronted with a situation, because yes, if you can just call the police, and that would be great, and the police can come in and save the day. But in situations where you unfortunately you're in an area where police aren't as trustworthy, so learning your area, learning whether calling the police is what you need to do, or should you go to the FBI, or should you what can you do and how do you do it? So they're trying to equip as many people so that children all over are actually being rescued, not just seen and disappearing.
So how would you know whether in your area you could call the police or you need to call someone else? I mean, do you have to have local contacts who are in this field, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think just getting involved in any local nonprofit and getting involved in not just nonprofits that work with preventing trafficking, but you go to the local food bank and go to volunteer anywhere and everywhere that's dealing with populations that are possibly vulnerable populations. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So and the more you talk to these people, to these to people in these populations, the more you find out the truth of the community that you're in. It's not really going to be the big, galas where you find out what's going on. It's getting into the nitty gritty and helping on the front line of these situations that you learn, who's trustworthy, who's not. Oh, we can go to this sheriff deputy, but this guy, you don't want to talk to, or however it is. And hopefully, most communities are in an area where, the nonprofits and the policemen can all be trusted, but that's unfortunately not the case for everywhere. So
yeah, is it like more of a problem in big cities? I would guess, is it? But where people can be anonymous and they're not known.
No, unfortunately, it's I've heard from people in small towns where it's because they're all involved. It becomes there was one survivor who said that was her first. She was taken, and the first people who came in the door were the entire police department.
Wow.
Because that was showing her she really had nowhere to go. There was no one who could help her.
Wow.
And then from then on, they had her. She was too afraid to do anything for a long time. So
It seems like in big cities it would actually be harder to get away with that, just because there's more eyes on you. There's more officers around that would be unwilling to participate or whatever, and actually shed light on it, versus in a small town or state troopers or something that are patrolling 50 miles of area.
Yeah, I think it depends on who you're working with. Because there might be areas. If it's a gang area, then the police won't even go in there.
Right.
So it's definitely it depends. I don't know what the ratio is, but there's trafficking in every state, so I can assume there's that problem everywhere.
So what are the keys to like a quick rundown on how to spot somebody who you think might be living a normal life but at the same time is being trafficked? So is there kind of a quick guide on that? Or
Yeah, so for labor trafficking, it would look, if these people have really strange hours or not consistent, they're being dropped off in the middle of the night, being picked up early in the morning or something like that, it's odd hours. Also, if their clothes aren't adequate, so it's in the middle of winter and they don't have a coat. And then for both labor and sex trafficking, if they don't make eye contact with you, that's part of the grooming is you believe as the victim that everyone else, it could hurt you, that they're dangerous. You can't go to the police. They'll deport you, or they'll do something, or, or the trafficker will do something to your family or something to you. So there's a lot of fear there. So they aren't going to have just a normal, hey, how are you, conversation with you. And then for sex trafficking for kids, it's, if they start to shut down, either two things. It's like if they start to withdraw and shut down, or if they start getting more sexualized words and actions that they weren't doing before. So it's a sudden change of behavior, either, one way or the other. And then also there's, tattoos. Traffickers can brand, especially if it's a gang, affiliated. Tattoos can be a branding. Obviously not every tattoo, like, oh, you have a tattoo, you must be,
Right.
But, there's like barcodes and different things, or if it's a sign that is affiliated with something, that can be a sign. And then if they also have new expensive phone or bag or clothes, all of a sudden they're starting these gifts they're getting, and then missing time. If they don't know what they did yesterday, or they don't know, they're missing 3 hours, because a lot of times they might be lying, or they might really not remember, because that is part of trauma, is the disassociation. So they just lose pockets of time. So that's a big one. And if they just start, that's, part of that behavior. If they were a good student and all of a sudden, that tanks, or, they're social and then they're not, so I think it really helps to, if you're someone, if a teacher or someone who works with kids, know them, get to know these children so that you can start to see those signs, and if you know that a child is, lonely or upset, or, you start to see not only the signs of trafficking, but the signs that could lead to trafficking. Oh, this child's being bullied extremely, or this child's being bullied a little bit, but like it's stopping that, obviously, because bullying is terrible, but also because it can lead to something else.
One thing you said, like for teenagers, sudden changes in behaviour, and I mean, I kind of imagine that's almost like what teenagers do, but is there like specific, you mentioned some specific things.
Yeah, so the more you know about trauma, the more you know what that can look like, so the disassociation and withdrawal. And yeah, some of that can just be, that's again when you know the teen, because if it's just normal hormonal things going on, teenagerhood is a rough ride.
Boyfriend left me, or something.
Yeah, but so if they do just start to really shut down, you want to check in anyway, because why are they shutting down?
Exactly.
There's something going on, whether it's trafficking or something else. So yeah, I mean, anytime that's happening, that's a good time to check in with your kid. But yeah, if they start acting more sexual or talking about it, and that's something, where are they getting that from?
So you have the app, but there are other things you're doing, like that you have a plan for?
Yeah, we have a plan to do a documentary, and then and just things like this where you're just raising awareness as much as possible.
Are you doing things with schools in Montana?
Not right now. We have talked about doing that. Yeah, we haven't, starting in 2020 has been
challenging.
Interesting.
Very
Yeah.
Challenging.
Yeah. And so we had talked about that, and then, school shut down. So so now that everything's kind of getting rolling again, we're going to look at that again.
So does this trafficking behavior, does it generally happen in adolescence? When does it generally begin?
Yeah, so, 80% of of course, these are statistics that, take it with a grain of salt, because there's a lot of people who we never, save. Yeah. They don't get found. So, and victims don't usually self-identify either. So, numbers are numbers. But what they have is that 80% of trafficking victims are under 24 years old. And the average age is like 12 to 14.
Wow. Is
when they're taken. But, I've heard of people saving kids, finding a car full of, stopping a traffic stop and saving kids, a car full of them too, and like babies in shoeboxes.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's from babyhood till, for labor, and, sex trafficking too, but for labor, it can be for, as long as the person survives. Right. So, yeah, the age is a very wide range.
Mm-hmm. I guess that would be considered a form of labor trafficking, the drug dealer, like these young men being brought over, and then is that what kind of trafficking would you consider that?
Yeah, that would be labor. I would assume it would just be, working as in the drug
trade.
The drug trade.
He's a drug
yeah, but I will say that there are a large amount of male victims of sex trafficking as well. Okay. Yeah. So that goes underreported more so than the female, because of our culture being what it is. It's harder for a male victim to come forward and say what's going on. Right. So yeah, that is also a big problem. But yeah, the majority, I think, right now is sex trafficking in America, but labor trafficking can often go unseen longer because we aren't as familiar with it, with the signs of it, because sex trafficking is more of a dramatic thing to talk about, and it takes up, when we talk about trafficking, that takes up more of the time because it is so horrendous. So then labor trafficking, we also need to make sure that that's in the picture and people know, the signs of that as well.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit more of a fuzzy line there too, because, okay, well, they're being trafficked, but they have a job, and they're theoretically earning money, so it's better than not having a job, maybe, I don't know. What's the dividing line there where it gets into trafficking versus like just hiring illegal immigrants to do landscaping or whatever?
Yeah, as soon as there's forced fraud or coercion. So as soon as they feel that they can't leave, as soon as, because there's exploitation, so there's labor exploitation and then there's labor trafficking. And, often one can lead into the other. But with exploitation, the person can still leave. Yes, they're not getting paid what they should be. They're in bad living conditions, but they know that they could leave.
And even though they may feel like they don't have other good alternatives, they could still leave.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, and that is kind of where the gray area is, because you have, as soon as there's, you could say, well, they could leave at any time and they didn't want to because they were making money. But if the alternative is starvation, that is...
Or being deported to...
Right. That's still a form of force, even if you've been forced into a situation, like that's there's a lot of that in the conversation with prostitution, because they say, well, it's a choice and she's getting paid, supposedly, so, but if her choice is between that and, her kid's starving, that's still force. She's being forced to make that decision because of the situation she's in. Or he.
Yeah, and that's kind of, in one sense, that's kind of getting into a societal problem of what's happening with the economy and jobs and labour and so on, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. The more holistically we can look at the problem, the sooner we can actually fix it. Because, if you just only look at one thing, you're not fixing the situation that caused it, and that's a lot of what they say about other countries too, of the people who are, selling their kids into slavery because they can't eat, because they've got 5 other kids that they're trying to feed, or, are prostituting their kids out. And it's, yes, absolutely horrible, but you can't just, well, we've arrested that person, so we fix the problem.
Right.
It's like, well, no, because the situation that created that problem still exists. Yeah. So we have to, you have to look at the whole thing.
As far as, like there's the supply situation and the demand situation with this, I mean, it happens because there's customers. And so is there any people kind of working on how do you deal with that end of it, with the demand end of it?
Yeah, Shared Hope does a lot of prevention work, and they are doing work with both raising awareness about, just child trafficking, but also raising awareness on, like, for specifically men's side, so trying to create that culture and helping inform men, especially because that's usually the clientele for prostitution, of what that actually looks like, and what trafficking is and what to do about it. So there is definitely a push to take that flood of demand and try to bring it as much to a trickle as possible.
If people want to, if people who are watching kind of want to help with this or want to get involved, what would they do? What would be the steps they could take to actually?
Yeah, I would say definitely find local organizations that are working on this. As we said, it's in every state and it's in every community pretty much. So find where you can help locally, and then that will help nationally, and I know a lot of people send money, and I do, sending money to those national organizations, which is great as well. But I think, if everyone found, or if there isn't one, start one, if there were these local organizations everywhere and they were getting the help and the resources that they needed, we can save kids and stop this on the local level that would then spread nationwide. But there's also, so I would say for organizations, the ones we mentioned, the Association for the Recovery of Children, Operation Underground Railroad, Shared Hope, all of these are really great. And Shared Hope has, if you become one of their ambassadors, so you just sign up to be an ambassador, and they put you through an online training program, and then you can use any of their resources to go out to schools or communities, and you can start giving talks. So that's a great way to raise awareness as well, especially if you don't have a local organization or you don't have the resources to start one, that's a great way because they give you the resources you need. They give you like DVDs and pamphlets and everything to go out and talk about this.
So, again, Mary's raising money for her program. So if you feel called, please contact her and write her a check.
Thank you.
So let's wrap up there. It's a big subject, a very important one, and as Mary said, there's things you can do if you want to help with this. So we encourage you to get involved in your local community. Look for the organisations that are taking a stand and get involved. So we'll see you next time on SummitCast.